So, today we're going to be talking about one of the most common complaints that I hear from women who I'm working with or that I'm even chit chatting with in the DMs on Instagram is time. That they don't feel like they have enough of it, they want more of it, they don't know how to get more of it, and it's one of the biggest obstacles that many women feel. Maybe you can relate to this. It's one of their biggest obstacles in trying to overcome burnout and get some work life balance that feels good. So, I want to talk to you today about how to open up more time and space in your life. And in fact, I want to show you, convince you that time is actually not your problem. And in fact, there's probably a lot on your plate that is not your problem. We just need to get to that place in our minds where we can recognize that. So that's what we're going to get into today. And I want to start off by drilling in this point. Success without burnout requires subtracting from your life. So I think oftentimes when we think about preventing burnout, when we think about recovering from burnout, it can feel overwhelming. Even it can feel overwhelming figuring out where to start, but it can even feel overwhelming thinking about how you're going to do it, because we get this erroneous idea that we actually need to add things into our life, that we need to, especially when it comes to self-care. I'm not going to get too much into that today, but I got into that on a live stream the other day, this issue of self-care. And it's funny because when it comes to addressing burnout, what we really need to do is subtract. The self-care that we engage in needs to include an element of taking things out of our life, right? Now, I want to raise three things that you might be feeling when I'm saying this, that we need to be subtracting. One thing that you might be feeling, and I think that if you identify in some way as a high achiever, you're probably going to be feeling this way. You might feel frustrated because your capacity is lower than it used to be. And if you're subtracting things out of your life, that means you're doing less. And you're not just doing less right now, you're doing less than that if you were in your optimal state, like energy wise, you'd be able to get so much more done, right? Hello. So I know that it can feel frustrating to think about subtracting when you feel like what you're doing already isn't enough. I actually just heard something, a client that I'm working with say something around these lines the other day. The other thing is that you might be looking at your schedule, your life, your week, your calendar, and you might be saying, yeah, right, I'm not going to subtract anything. How could I possibly subtract any of this? You might, there a lot of resistance can come up when we think about what can we cut out of our lives. Because we're used to doing all the things. We're used to being the fixer, being the go-to gal. And it feels like everything might on your calendar or on your to-do list might feel necessary. I want to try to bust that myth for you. I want you to believe me, please. There are things, I can guarantee you, there are things on your to-do list that can be subtracted. It's just a matter of identifying what are the right things and how to do it. So that's one thing. And then a third thing that I want to mention, a kind of a feeling that might come up, type of resistance that might come up to this subtracting is you might feel guilty, anxious, or even ashamed to be subtracting things from your schedule, to be doing less. This is really, really common among high achieving women. I think it's one of the biggest obstacles, if not the biggest obstacle, to subtracting. But it's one that we need to figure out. We need to learn to overcome all three of these obstacles, mostly in our mind. I'd say actually not just mostly in their mind, they're all in our mind, and we really need to learn to overcome them if we want to have better work-life balance, if we want to get to the point where our capacity isn't down here, it's up here again, if we want to get to the point where we're succeeding but without the burnout, then we have to subtract. We're doing too much. You are, by definition, beyond your capacity, right? Okay. And I'm going to give you some, I'm going to go through 3 big problems that you might be facing right now and talk a little bit about how to solve them. But even before I get into that, I just want to give you some examples of how, what are the types of things that we could be subtracting out of our lives, just to kind of like get your brain rolling around on it as I'm talking. So one example, I already kind of mentioned this around the issue of self-care, that self-care, essentially part of self-care is subtracting, right? Is figuring out the subtraction. Other things that we can subtract, there are things that we can subtract at both the level or the, in the realm of our work lives and in the realm of our personal or life lives. One example, delegating. Maybe think about the ways that you might be able to delegate certain tasks in your work life and even in your home life. And sometimes, think about delegating in a really, how do I put this? In a little bit more of a broad way. Delegating could simply be hiring out, getting grocery delivery instead of going to the grocery store. That, in my book, is an example of delegating. Anyway, so I just want to put that out there just to give you kind of some ways to think about how can I subtract. Okay, so problem number 1, I'm going to give you 3 problems that we need to overcome. Problem number 1 is mistaking busyness for productivity or accomplishment. So on this point, who has, first of all, if you know what I'm talking about, raise your hand or, give me a little emoji in the comments if you're watching this. Here's the thing. Just because you are doing things doesn't mean you're actually getting stuff done that's important or relevant or really, valuable, right? We can be doing and doing and doing all day long. And the fact is, this might not apply to all of you, but some of you, I know that it will. If you find that you never have a to-do list, sorry, let me back up a second. If you find that you always have a growing and growing and growing and growing to-do list, ask yourself, how many of those tasks are you actually putting on that to-do list voluntarily? Probably quite a number of them, okay? It's like we get addicted to this feeling of just constantly doing stuff. If you have a problem sitting still, or doing something fun that is like not work related or does not feel productive, like you're actually accomplishing something, then this applies to you. Another thing that I want to kind of like drill in on this point is, so first, just because you're doing lots of stuff and you have a never ending to-do list doesn't mean you're actually being productive, first of all. And you don't get a gold star for filling every rectangle on your calendar. Nobody is awarding gold stars for you for that. A full calendar, that is not the goal here, right? The goal, I would say, in terms of your life and in terms of your work, the goals should be outcome based, right? Not how many hours am I working? How many spots can I fill up on my calendar? Here's the thing, is that many of us like to keep busy. It's what we've done for a long time. It's what we're used to. And oftentimes we are keeping busy out of fear. Stay with me here. What I mean is, some of us have this fear that if we're not outwardly showing how busy we are and how much work we're doing, how much hours we're putting in, how much dedication we have, if we're not showing, responding to emails at midnight on a Saturday, then what if people don't think you're valuable? What if people don't think that, you're smart enough or you're good enough or you're worth enough? We've somehow gotten into this position where we are equating being busy with our worthiness, our value. We have this fear that we need to be doing constantly in order to be worthy, in order to be enough. And so we keep doing everything. We keep doing all the things, taking on more and more, saying yes to this, saying yes to that, saying yes to things people aren't even asking us to say yes to, just to keep generating evidence for ourselves, to prove to ourselves that we're good enough and that we're valuable enough and, that we're worthy. So this first problem of mistaking busyness for productivity and accomplishment, it really comes down to two kind of to a basic mindset shift that we need to make, is that we need to stop equating our busyness with actually doing, and we need to stop equating us doing things with our worth. You are worthy, you are valuable all on your own, just for being a human being. Okay? So that's problem number one. And I'm not saying that is easy to do, by the way. I'm definitely not. I've been there. I think the first step, though, is acknowledgement, or self-acknowledgement, and asking yourself, am I equating being busy with being important or worthy or smart or whatever? Am I mistaking my busyness for productivity and accomplishment and worthiness? That's step one. It's just the acknowledgement. And maybe this doesn't apply to you, but for some of you, I think it will. Problem number two, believing that everything that needs to be done must be done by you. You need to get over this. Honestly, you need to get over this. It's this fear that, before I started in with this, I said, what is one key example of things that we can, or one key way that we can subtract things is by delegating, right? And this is kind of where delegating comes in, obviously, this idea if something needs to be done and it doesn't get done by you, who's it going to be done by? So I understand that there's this fear that among many of us, that if you delegate, things will fall apart. Now, I know that, in the realm of work, we're coming from many different, I'm sure that many of you are coming from many different kind of work environments or career trajectories. I know that for those of you, if you are an entrepreneur of any sort, there is a real fear in delegating because you built your business. You don't think anyone can do any of the tasks as good as you can, and they might not be able to, some of them. But it's not just with entrepreneurs. It's basically, I think this applies to many, many, many of us. This fear of basically, we have a mistrust in others' abilities, maybe, that we are so perfectionist that we fear that others aren't going to be, we struggle to meet our standards. How could somebody else do that? And there also you might be feeling some guilt in asking for or allowing others to help you. These are all totally normal feelings. And it applies both in your work life and in your home life, right? I mean, who here finds himself doing the dishes because your partner just doesn't do it the right way? I know this is a common thing, seriously. And, when I was planning for this video, I actually thought of a really good example that came up in my life recently, or at least with a friend of mine recently. One of my friends recently hired a house cleaner for the first time. And she was saying that Um, the feeling that came up for her, so she grew up in a home that did not have a cleaner. Um, and for her, this idea that she would have a cleaner, I mean, she's avoided this for a very long time. We went to college together. She and I are both, in our mid late 40s. Um, but when she hired the cleaner, well, first of all, I would just want to say the good part is that it lightened her load a ton, just hiring somebody to clean her house. She has a husband and 2 kids. So that is a huge load of work off of her shoulders, um, off of her family's shoulders, but I think off of her shoulders particularly. A lot of free time opened up because of that. But also she's noticed some guilt come up and some shame come up around having hired a cleaner. Like, I should be doing that. I should be doing that. So anyway, sorry, I'm going off on a tangent here, but I think that, this whole idea, believing everything needs to be done, that needs to be done by you. There's a lot of feelings that can come up that will prevent you from delegating, like guilt, like shame, I should be doing that, or fear that nobody else can do it as good as me. But if you can overcome those uncomfortable feelings and just go for it, so much can open up to you, like an entire free weekend day in my friend's case. So that's number 2. And the number 3 problem I want to talk about here is misplaced urgency. And by that, I mean every problem doesn't require your immediate attention. So I hear some version of, I want to share this with you, something I hear from a lot of my clients in some way or another, that they're constantly busy putting out fires, whether it's at work or at home, right? So we'll focus on the work thing, the work realm for the moment. And one thing that I find, okay, so they're constantly putting out fires. And by fires, I mean things that feel, obviously, to them, feel super, super urgent, like it has to be done right now, life or death. They're checking emails first thing in the morning. And when they do that, by default, you start checking emails first thing in the morning, and you're inviting other people to unload all of their problems and to-do lists on you. I'm serious about this. That is essentially what checking our emails does, is that we are now in the mode of responding to other people's problems. Some of you have this way worse than others. I know that some of you are getting crazy amounts of emails per day. Some of you less so. But in either case, it's kind of a similar thing. Unless your job description is answer and respond to other people's emails, then my guess is that your main goal at work, or your main, deliverables, what you need to get done, is not emailing, it's your actual work. And the thing is that, with this, and I'm calling it misplaced urgency, in the sense of, we get this fear, we open up the emails, we hear about what's happening, and we get this fear that if I don't respond right now, something bad is going to happen. I don't know what that something bad is. You probably, if this sounds familiar to you, I mean, honestly, think about this. Does this feel like it applies to you? You open up an email. What are you feeling in your body? Are you feeling something like right here, for instance, when you're opening up your emails? And are you thinking, oh crap, I have to respond to this right now? If you are feeling that, if your immediate thought is I need to respond right now, and the idea of not responding right now is kind of giving you a stomach ache, that is basically something is going off in your brain telling you a story of some kind of bad thing or undesirable thing is going to happen. I don't think I need to tell you that this is really a huge suck on your energy and on your time. Because while you're putting out while you're dealing with everyone else's quote urgent problems, while you're putting out all those fires, usually a bigger one is growing in the background. Actually, I want to say two bigger ones, two bigger fires are growing in the background. One of them is that when we're putting out everyone else's fires, when we're focusing, when we're misplacing urgency and spending all of our time on that stuff, it's like you have no time to spend on what I like to call like your big rocks. The big rocks being whatever your big projects are, for instance. So like whatever it is that's really big that you're responsible for. Maybe you're writing a paper, maybe you're writing a book, maybe you are, planning a conference or a big presentation or whatever. Whatever your thing is that you are responsible for gets somehow that is probably more relevant to your success than all the little fires, but requires more energy of you. When we're spending all our time on the little fires, on the embers, we ignore the big fire, the big thing that we should be focusing on. So that's one problem. The other big fire that starts burning more wildly in the background is your health. And I mean that in terms of your physical health, your mental health, your emotional health, that you get more burnt out in the process the more that you misplace urgency onto all of these smaller things that are other people's problems, essentially. So those are the three big things. Like when it comes to figuring out how do we subtract, these are the big challenges that I see. I'm sure there are more that I'm not mentioning right now, but these are three that I really wanted to highlight that I think are the most common, they're most relevant that I wanted to highlight. Mistaking busyness for productivity or accomplishment, connected to that, equating your busyness with your worth. 2, believing everything needs to be done by you. And 3, misplacing urgency. So the next question is, how do we get over all of that? How do we start actually subtracting? How do we get into a position where we're not filling up every block on our calendar, where, you're delegating to open up more time in your life, and where you're not spending so much time and energy on other people's problems and neglecting the things that are the most important for you and that'll move the needle for you in your life and in your career. How do we start subtracting in order to make space for what's most important? That is the challenge. Here's what I know. For most women, just knowing that you should cut tasks and drain your energy and time usually isn't enough to get you to actually do it. All right, just knowing it, like in our rational mind, knowing, oh, I should do that, it's usually not enough. The other thing is kind of associated with this, even getting to the point of knowing which tasks you should cut or where you should delegate, knowing that rationally speaking, if I did this good thing would happen. If I cut that out, I'd feel a lot better. If I stopped having this meeting every, Wednesday, that would give me more free time. Even knowing like really specific things that we need to cut usually isn't enough to get us to actually do the work. And I think that, I hope that this is making sense. The reason why it can be so hard to actually do the things that you know that you need to do in this context is that your nervous system is kicking in. What do I mean by that? Well, you've been saying yes to a lot of things and you feel comfortable and safe doing that because it's what you've always done. And to a certain extent, it's worked for you. And when I say you've been saying yes, I mean that you've been filling up your calendar. You've been working really hard with an ever-growing to-do list. You've been refusing to delegate and just doing it all yourself because you're the best at everything. You've been putting out the fires and people are thanking you for it. And it's all been working out really, really well for you, sort of, to a point. Not completely, because if it were working that well, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now. But the thing is that to a certain extent, it's been working for you and you've been feeling, comfortable and safe saying yes, right? Saying no, doing the delegating, blocking out time for lunch and refusing to answer phone calls during your lunch, pausing on your emails and waiting until 10 a.m. so that you have some space to get some actual work done. Basically, and I put all these examples in the category of what it looks like to say no. Saying no can feel, quote, it can feel unsafe. And by that, I mean it triggers your nervous system to turn on your stress response to protect you. And it shifts you into the sympathetic state, the fight or flight state. This is an automatic thing, right? Shifting into fight or flight when our brain detects something that feels not so great, that feels out of the ordinary, that feels uncomfortable. Where does that leave us? What does that mean? How do we make it so that we're able to do these things, that we're able to say no and open up more time and space in our life? Basically, we need to rewire our nervous system in a sense so that those things start to saying no starts to feel normal and comfortable so that we're not so scared to do it. At the same time, we need to step out of our comfort zone and do it to show ourselves that, hey, no, the world's not going to fall apart when we get grocery delivery. Sorry, I used a really basic example, but you could think of the examples in your life. Basically, if you want to start subtracting and opening up more time and space in your life, essentially you need to do two types of things. And this is how I support my clients in Thrive. That's my one-on-one burnout recovery coaching program for high achieving women. So we come at this problem or this challenge of subtracting, opening up time and space in two ways. One is that practical or pragmatic kind of approach where we figure out, at least on a surface level, what are the things that could logically be subtracted. And at first it might feel like nothing, but, we start off with something, right? And then the second is by working on the nervous system. So, yeah, just to kind of like drive this home, in our mind, we might know that we need to say no to something, right? But your body is going to tell you a different story. And once you start feeling these uncomfortable feelings in your body, your mind is going to respond to that and then, make up a story and tell you that actually you can't say no, you have to say yes. That's kind of how it works. So if busyness is the thing that makes you feel safe, then, we basically need to work on retraining your nervous system to start feeling safe when you're not busy all the time, when you are delegating, when you are allowing there to be white space in your calendar. We need to start retraining your nervous system so that you feel comfortable letting go of all this extra stuff that's on your plate and weighing you down. And, so that you can get to a point where you feel safe respecting your capacity, your actual current capacity to do things, and that you feel safe taking care of yourself so that you can actually grow your capacity. right? Um, and this is, I'm not going to get into this in too much more detail, but this is essentially the type of work that I do with my clients, is figuring out what needs to be subtracted and how can we feel more safe doing it? How can we get out of our comfort zone a little bit to cut out, say no to some things that aren't really fueling us? And, how can we show our nervous system? How can we get to a point where that is our new norm? The saying no is our new norm instead of constantly saying yes to everything. And just kind of a little addendum to this. This is also why, so something that I hear from a lot of women is that they are afraid to start focusing on me, until things calm down at work. But if your norm is to never be calm, if it's to always have like an ever growing to-do list, then that's actually never going to happen. That means that you have to start the work of healing from burnout while your schedule is crazy. Because you need to learn how to create the calm. It's not just going to suddenly materialize. It would be awesome if it would, but it almost never does, because we have such an important part to play in creating a life that is full of to-do lists, or that it has more calm in it. I hope that this is landing. And if you want to hear more about how I can support you in doing this kind of work, then I encourage you to just shoot me a DM on Instagram, or if you are watching this on YouTube, just to send me an email, hello@rooted.life, and that is going to be in the description of the video. And I can tell you a little bit more about what that would look like, and see if it makes sense. We can hop on a call and have a little chat. So that is all for today. I hope that you're having a great day, and I will talk to you guys soon again. Bye-bye.